Hello and welcome back around the bonfire. It's a gray and gloomy day in Chicago as we're enjoying the last bits of our fall spring. I'm joined, as always, by Tim. It's John here again, but today we do actually have a special guest with us, and I'm going to start there because it feels like the appropriate place to start. We got Joe Lowery of Backheeled in with us. Joe, we appreciate you being here. Thanks for making the time.
John, Tim, thank you guys for having me. I'm a big fan of all the work that you guys do, and I'm stoked to be here. I love it.
That is the best energy we've ever gotten on an intro. I feel like that's worth saying.
Yeah, some of our guests, you think that there's someone with a gun just off camera.
There's not. There's not.
Blink if you're feeling safe, Joe. Blink if
Right.
you're feeling safe.
I feel great. I feel super safe. No, for real. This is the most fun time of the year, right? Like right into the beginning of the season. There's a lot of hope. There's a lot of intrigue. I love what I do, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, awesome. We appreciate you being here. If you're not familiar with Joe and what the folks over at Backheeled are doing, it is maybe the one of, if not the best places to get all your MLS, USL, USMNT news. So if you're not a reader slash follower slash subscriber, go ahead and give them a look. It's backheeled.com and Backheeled on socials, correct? Just make
Yes,
sure I
sir.
didn't miss something. Perfect. Spelled as it sounds, you're not going to get tripped up anywhere. Easy there. Tim, now I'll ask how your day was. How are you doing?
Also, gray, gloomy, long, but here we are.
Well, we're both in Chicago, so.
Yeah. It's that fall spring where it was 60 degrees today, and it's going to be like probably 25 or something like that by the weekend, and this is the world we live in. But hey,
It could be better. It could be worse.
we've got
But
MLS is back, so we'll just celebrate that.
exactly. I would say, just like Joe said, this is the best time of the year. Thankfully, for the first time in what feels like forever, maybe this is not like the only hopeful and exciting part of the year for Chicago Fire fans. A little bit higher expectations than, gosh, I hope we can win a couple games at home. Before we go like full deep dive into our season preview here, which we will get to our season preview, we'll talk a little bit of Houston as well, as that is the opening match of the 2026 campaign for Chicago Fire. We're going to run through some very quick news notes here. I think one that is a little more interesting than the rest. Just to wrap up the Coachella Valley Invitational Tournament, Fire finished with a draw and a loss, 2-2 against Austin, 4-3 against Portland after starting undefeated and looking like they would never ever lose a game. They did actually lose a game there towards the end. That said, I mean, Tim, I'll let you chat about it a little bit. Don't want to spend a lot of time on preseason, but I think the big thing for me at least, Chris Mueller looks like a man reborn, which obviously Chris dealing with some health issues last year, unable to see the field. It's great to see him looking like himself again.
Yeah, he is, and it shows what a savvy move it was by the Fire to sign him to a new contract. He is eligible to be on the supplemental roster when all's said and done, and he just looks like, I mean, you're not going to get a player with a higher upside at that kind of a cap hit that has a proven track record as opposed to a young talent maybe coming through. So it's great to see him back, and it's great to see him doing so well. But man, that Portland absolute last kick of the Fire's preseason sent them to their only loss. So, it's the way the cookie crumbles. Not exactly the way you want to prepare for the regular season, but I think that, probably some lessons learned. I don't think you could read too much into it.
Probably not. Joe, I don't know how familiar you are with the lore of the show. I personally am somebody who memory holes Austin, except for the one preseason game that we see the Fire play them in a year. So this is the last time I'll be able to think about Austin FC. And now I'm like, oh my God, did I get their name right? But like, yeah, I got the name right. Like, we're good.
Yeah, FC Austin, Austin FC, Austin SC, any of those will do just fine. Yeah, I think that'll track.
Come on, guys. They're one of the teams in Texas that has all four parts of his football ground, with fans in the stands and enclosed. So
There you go.
Yeah, but look, all we know, they're there. They're going to be playing soccer, and now we're on to the real games. The piece of news here that I think actually may be worth talking about a little bit. Nothing confirmed at the moment, but there is some reporting coming through. It looks like Omari Glasgow is heading out on loan to Monterey Bay FC in the USL Championship. Heading to Beatos, as Tim would call
yes,
them.
I am heavy. Joe, I need you to join me in pushing Beatos as their
I'm
nickname.
so in, Tim. I'm so in. That is one of the greatest things ever, truly.
I did get Tim texts me and says, "Hey, can you toss this in there?" And I'm thinking to myself, I read Monterey and I go, "Really? On loan? Like, that's surprising." I'm sitting here thinking he's going to the Mexican giant Monterey as opposed to, Monterey Bay and USL Championship. But it seems to be a victim of an international slot. a little disappointing for an Omari Glasgow truther. But Tim, what can you fill us in on details wise at the moment?
So yeah, I mean, that may have been my fault that you thought he was going to the Mexican Giant as opposed to the USL Championship team, because when writing the copy about the article, I hit R twice for the Monterey every single time, and I had to correct myself. No, it was Monterey Bay with one R, and I may have just texted you the wrong thing. But the nice thing about this from the Fire's perspective is, one, it gets Omari Glasgow, who's already, shown what he can do at the international level, but had a tough time getting minutes by the time the summer came around last year, a chance at real minutes in development. And it also solves the Fire's sort of like international slot conundrum. We had content on this on MenaRed97.com. We'll have more of it this week, but the Fire essentially were 2 international slots shy. This means that they're down to 1, and it's kind of okay if they have one too many international players, as long as Andre Franco is out with a not season-ending but long-term injury that keeps him out more than 6 games, and the Fire can just sort of rotate that final international slot to become cap compliant, or roster slot compliant, not.
Just fully in the sicko weeds and the league. The year
Yeah.
hasn't even started yet. So
I mean, look,
we love
what it
that.
means is that it's fine, right? Like
Yeah,
that's the TLDR on it.
it's fine. It'll work out. We're excited for Omari. We're adding to our collection of non MLS teams that we support. So is Valor FC, Portland Heart of Pines. We'll add Monterey Bay in there for Omari's sake. But it's good for the young player, and it solves a need that the Fire had. Last thing we'll talk about: Fire released the Forever Red home shirts. A little bit of skepticism on how long this is going to be worn with some of the new schedule changes. Tim, I think you're hyped on the collar. Joe, if I could get you from a third party neutral perspective to give me like a tier ranking, like S, A, B, C, where you fall.
I'm gonna give it a solid B with some A upside. I'm a
All right,
sucker for a
this is
collared
over.
kit. I'm a sucker for a collared kit. There's just so many better ones
Yes.
this time around. Like there's a lot of bangers, I think, in this year's class of kits, and so for that reason, it's a good kit. I don't think it's great. It's definitely not transcendent by any means. I mean, the collar is a bit oddly shaped, I suppose. Maybe a button or two would do a little bit of business there for me. But it's a good kit. Don't get me wrong. And I could see myself being a slight hater in this instance, and maybe it belongs as an.
The no button thing is weird. It seems like it's almost like a priest collar kind of thing, but I mean, hey, like it's a shirt, it's red, and I think that that's kind of a lot better than where the Fire were with their jerseys a couple years ago. So
It's a definite. I mean, yeah, I feel like B is respectful. I think being who I am, I'm going to put it at minimum an A tier, right? But I'm also a little bit of a sucker for like, I want to see more like hoops out there. I want some more classic shirts. I don't want so much of the new stuff, but I mean, man, like San Jose, you're right. Like there are some really incredible. Like San Jose's was incredible. Atlanta's new away shirt. Like there are some really fantastic, like the best I've seen from Adidas in a while for a lot of these.
Yeah, and I have time for the slightly more simplistic designs. Like I'm not against that. I don't think that rules you out of being an S tier sort of kit. I just think there were some other ones, even of the classic designs, that caught my eye a little bit more than the Chicago one. But it is good. It is very good, and I could see myself wearing it. So good job.
Joe's gonna leave here and write an article like it was terrible. They made me say it was good. No, yeah, no crazy news there. Like I mentioned before, so it's a little bit of interesting tweak with the schedule. There is some kind of up in the air of will this be replaced summer of 27 or summer of 28. If you're gonna be stuck with something for hypothetically a year and a half to 2 years, like longer than you would normally, I should say. Not a bad shirt to be stuck with that schedule change. Um, we'll leave our news there. I don't think there's much more to say, and I'm just stammering over my words now. Let's break into our actual meat and potatoes of it all, the final actual season preview, as we are sitting here now 3 days away from Chicago Fire kicking off their 2026 season. Just to recap from last year, if you're new or unfamiliar, the Fire finished 8th in the East with 53 points. That was 15 wins, 8 draws, 11 losses. The second most goals scored in MLS with 68, trailing only Messi and friends out of South Beach. They also had 60 goals allowed, which was the second most of any postseason team behind Orlando, who they beat in the play-in of the MLS driven by Audi playoffs last year before making it and falling to the Supporters Shield winning Philadelphia Union in the first round proper of the playoffs. It is the best season we've seen from the Fire in 15 years. I mean, Tim, in the notes here we have 2017, but realistically, it kind of feels like 2009. I
Regular
mean, is that
season results
unreasonable?
2017, but no, there were no playoff victories because the Red Bulls completely bounced them out of the playoffs pretty quickly and unceremoniously in one game in 2017. So yeah, I think that 2009 is kind of a better marker of what it felt like because the Fire won a postseason game, and that hasn't happened since the year that Obama took office.
Yeah, I was 12, I think, something like that.
You always make me feel so old, John.
Joe, just from a kind of a more national perspective, can you clue us in a little bit to, I mean, A, the season at large, but B, kind of ending playoff run, if you want to call it that, right? But ending that season, kind of the national view of the Fire, because it does seem to have improved even in the last 3 months.
Yeah, I think it has. I mean, the Fire are a pretty popular pick to land a home game in the Eastern Conference this year. I haven't finalized my picks just yet, but that's at least the ballpark where I would have them at this stage. Home field advantage in the playoffs, I should say, as one of those top four teams. I mean, I think the sentiment around Chicago last year, even from the very first game that lost to Columbus, was they're going to be fun, and they were fun, and some of the numbers reflected that you read off, John, and that they were a much improved team. There actually is a vision for what Greg Berhalter and the Chicago Fire want this club to look like. And how long has it been since we've actually been able to say that? I think that was very much the national feeling about the Chicago Fire, is that this team is not the finished product. There were some disappointments last year. There were some unexpectedly positive moments as well. But really, this team is marching for the first time in a very, very long time, as you guys have discussed, towards being something that actually looks sustainably good and effective in Major League Soccer. As long as I've been doing this job, that's never been true, right? There have been little blips and bursts along the way, but for something that feels sustainable, like this feels sustainable, and all of the other positive momentum around this club, whether that's ownership or whether that's the stadium situation, all of these things are pointing positively, and I don't think that's been the case for Chicago in a really, really, really long.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way of putting it, right? Like it felt like there was a false dawn right before COVID happened, and then COVID happened, and then it turns out by the time that the fans could see a Georg Heitz assembled Chicago Fire team that they weren't really that exciting to see. And I think that last year sort of felt like what a lot of the promise was with new ownership coming in 2019 for the
Yeah,
first time.
yeah, very much so. I mean, and I think nationally, the Fire were always viewed as, at least under Mansueto. Let me start there. The Fire were viewed as this club with untapped potential, right? And I think that sentiment has been so clear. And that was the right perspective to have on this team, because even before you get Greg Berhalter in, there's talk about, oh, wow, when they're looking for the DP that became Hugo Kuipers, this team could spend an MLS record number on a signing, right? And we all love to see big numbers in the headlines and all these things, right? Whether that actually matters when it comes to building a good team or not, it doesn't really matter ultimately. But it gives you access to a higher ceiling, right? We're seeing that with Miami right now, where their ceiling is higher than any other team in MLS. Maybe LAFC you could put in this category too, but the teams that spend money and can land those players that are going to put them in the upper echelon, that gives you access to a level of competitiveness that most teams just don't have, and a ceiling that most teams don't have. So that awareness of that ceiling, we've all known that about Chicago. It's just been, well, can someone who actually knows how to put together a squad and identify players and build out an organization across all fronts, can that person be in charge? And it turns out that it sure looks like Greg Berhalter is that person.
Yeah, and I think the other thing behind that is the Fire's Academy, which, it's a talent-rich area. The Academy didn't really produce, but there's been a lot of investment in the Academy, and Mansueto's vision really is for a Academy-driven club, I think almost more than any other in MLS in terms of an academy that wants to recruit exclusively from like the local metropolitan area. And that's kind of cool. Like the Fire had a number of people that, produced at a high level in MLS last year, led the minutes, and Centers at Heart people hate me when I say this, but for academy products in MLS history, in terms of players that spent serious time in the academy and not were there for a year because they were going to get signed to a pro deal after a year. And I mean, those numbers are going to go down this year because Brian Gutierrez is no longer in the squad, and that's the way it works. It'll ebb
And
and flow.
Orhel's going to get buried on the bench, that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, probably, right. And I think that's going to be a question, is like, how do you develop guys, or what? I mean, where would Sergio Orhel go to get minutes? Because I think he is a young player that has the potential to develop his game, but needs to, right? Like, he just could not defend for the life of him last year, and you can't really be a midfielder that doesn't have that in your game and get MLS minutes.
Well,
I mean, unless you're Lionel
let's
Messi.
but it's a little bit different, some may say. We'll talk a little bit more, I think, about Sergio and about some other guys, just to kind of recap the offseason, so we can maybe talk with a fuller picture, right? Same, Joe, you guys mentioned Brian Gutierrez moving on to Chivas this winter, reported $5 million move plus some add-ons to come. Justin Reynolds, another academy product being moved to Sporting Kansas City. He is one of 4 current players on the roster in Kansas City. Romani Kawhi,
along with 3 goalies. Yeah.
Right.
yeah, it's Justin Reynolds, 3 goalies, and the kit man. Romani Kawhi goes back to Spain at the expiration of his loan. The Fire did not pick up the purchase option. Tom Barlow found his way to Cincinnati, and Kellen Acosta, as we know, now playing in Poland with Pagoni Session after leaving on a mutual termination that I do believe counted as a buyout for the Fire. To fill the ranks, we saw Robin Lod, the longtime Minnesota Loon, signed as a free agent, the all-time leading scorer up in Minnesota, looking to recapture some of his potentially 2024 glory, getting back to 20-goal contributions. Anton Saletros coming over from AIK in Sweden with Champions League experience, Europa League experience. And then on the back line, you're bringing in Mbezeli Mbuaze, a much-lauded South African product who... Joe, I don't know how closely you've paid attention. We've gained a lot of new South African followers, and they all want to know why we aren't talking about it more. And look, so far so good. He performed well at AFCON. I'm sure we'll talk about that more. Jason Shukaluk getting a first-team deal after winning the Golden Boot with Fire 2 in 2025. Josh Cohen brought in as a goalkeeper reinforcement. And now we're still hearing rumors of Robert Lewandowski, despite Hugo Kuipers putting up one of the best striker seasons we've seen in a while. We'll say that. All that said, it kind of brings to a question, right? Where, looking at this list of kind of additions and subtractions, how are we rating and ranking these guys and looking at specifically this winter window as a whole? A lot of that work done early in December, so January, February, a little bit quiet, but still we're talking about 3 or 4 potential starters here as we look at week 1.
Yeah, and I'm curious, Tim, what you think about this. To me, it seems like the real upgrades came in central midfield, where that was clearly the focus of this team. I mean, also wanting to avoid a goalkeeping performance like the one that ended Chicago's season. That seems to have been a legitimate area of focus as well, and I can't blame them for that. But really, it is the midfield that has seen the upgrade. And to me, it is very much an upgrade, even though I am extremely high on Brian Gutierrez. I think higher than it seems like Chicago were on Brian Gutierrez. Not that he doesn't have frustrating things about his game, which is to say we already talked about Orahel's lack of defending. Guti doesn't get out stock free on that either, right? I mean, he is limited defensively at this stage of his career, or at least his effort and energy was limited for large portions of last season after the ball turned over. I think Brian Gutierrez is a more talented on-ball player than Robin Lod. Robin Lod is going to give you more across all phases and probably will roughly be an even sort of contribution there. You toss in getting Andre Franco, ideally at the end of the season. I thought he looked really, really good. Maybe you get a little bit out of him. And then Salertros, somebody that I think the team is very, very high on. And I think I think he's going to be an upgrade on Orahel, who I think is a fine MLS player. Like I think Orahel works. I think he probably works a little better for Columbus than he does for Chicago, but I think he works as a player that can give you 1,200 minutes, 1,500 minutes in an MLS season. But Salertros is going to be more balanced. Then you toss in the couple of moves around the fringes, and I think overall this team is just better. And the crazy thing is that they have that flexibility that you mentioned to go make a move in the summer, and then maybe even make another move after that at the top of the roster if they so choose and go out and sign a striker, move Kuipers, and then they still have a DP spot open just like they did when they started. So to me, this team looks stronger, not wildly stronger, but it does look stronger in a way that's going to help them be better defensively, which is the clear and obvious problem last season.
Yeah. And I mean, we talked a lot over the course of last year. Anyone that was listening to us last year knows what we thought about Brian Gutierrez. I mean, I think his talent level is really through the roof. I think that he's one of the most talented players that's been on the Fire's roster. I agree. You know, I said that even when Shaqiri was on the roster, the problem was you don't see it consistently in games. I think to make a USMNT sort of comparison, similar-ish position, different way of playing it, I think that he's way more talented than Diego Luna. But Diego Luna did it in games and did it in big games in a way that Brian Gutierrez just was not able to do in his time in MLS. And I mean, that matters in the end, right? Like, it doesn't matter how good you look in practice or what you can do in drills. It matters if you can help teams win. And that was a challenge. I mean, it's wild. Statistically speaking, I couldn't believe this when I looked up the numbers. In goals added, according to American Soccer Analysis, per 90 minutes, he was, the third best player in MLS last year after Lionel Messi and Denis Wonga. And like Sam Surridge is right behind him. Brian Gutierrez is the surprising name in that list of players, right? Mm-hmm. Like, nobody guesses it if they didn't already know it. And I think that says a lot about the way that he was getting those numbers of he would be doing things that would be add to that number, get the ball into dangerous places, but wasn't actually incisive. And he's gone, right? I think that Robin Lod is a very good, probably, possibly the best backup midfielder in MLS once Andre Franco is healthy, and I think that he's more than capable starter. Um, it's it's the position that has group that has changed the most since opening week last season, because all three of the Fire's likely starting midfielders were not here for that week because Jay Davila joined partway through the season, didn't really know what he was doing for a month or two, and got consistently better throughout the course of the year. And now it looks like it could be a very good midfield group. Here's the thing I'm kind of stuck on though. If you look at the roster, like you're like, okay, that's a good player, that's a good player, you can go through the starting 11, right? I mean, we didn't even mention like Andrew Gutman. There were some challenges that, the backs and, the Fire have hopefully tried to address them. But it's really, a lot of these players look like they're very, very good. I just don't know how many of them are elites. So I think you're in this position where this could be a very, very good team. Like I could see them finishing fourth. I think challenging to win, the Supporter Shield, even without Miami possibly putting together a god tier season, all that stuff. Like that seems like it's asking more than would be realistic. And that's almost the challenge of very good, but how much of it's really great?
I think the interesting thing to me, Tim, right, is looking at kind of one thing we talked a lot about was like you kind of have your big pieces set in this roster, and now you're building around the edges heading into this window, right? And that's what this feels like because you're not counting on it. To your point, none of the pieces brought in were set to be elite. But what you do have is Philip Zinkernagel, who gave you 30 goal contributions and looked like one of the best players in MLS last year. Even if you're not getting that same numbers production, you would expect to get that level of play. You have a guy in Jay Davila who is young and is learning and is growing, but seems to have the tools that it would take to be one of the best defensive midfielders in the league, right? And I think you're kind of counting on if we can support our guys who we know have this very high ceiling, they can take that next step. And you mentioned Andrew Gutman, quietly one of the best fullbacks in MLS, I think, and I don't think that's like a crazy thing to say. I know you've been on that for a long time, Tim. The other side of the field, Leonardo Barroso, who we saw early spurts of him playing at a very high level. He's young. He faced some injuries. The season kind of tapered off, and Jonathan Dean kind of took over that starting role. I expect Leo to start 34 games if he's fit for 34 games, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him have an Andrew Gutman type season, right? Pushing close to, if not above, 10 goal contributions. And that's kind of what I think you get out of Saletros, out of Lod. Specifically, we've seen in preseason a little bit of a 4-2-3-1, adding some defensive stability, letting your guys on the wings get forward and really contribute in the attack.
Can I want to ask a question on Guti still, just very quickly, and then I also have a follow-up on sort of this more macro conversation. Do you guys think the Guti sale is motivated, at least in part, by wanting to stack up some allocation money? I would sort of assume that that's part of this, right? Because you see this happen with clubs all across the league where they are trying to move through players so that they can restock the amount of money that they can spend, effectively extending their salary cap. Tim, is that do you think that was a part of this? Obviously, there's probably more to it as well, but...
Yeah, I mean, it's something that Greg has talked about, how moving him on was sort of necessary to be able to make some of the other moves. Now, I mean, obviously, those other moves included signing a midfielder, so it's like you wouldn't have had to do that if you hadn't moved him on. But, yeah, I think it was that. I think it was also just kind of realizing that, if you're going to sell him, if you're going to move him on, this was the time to do it. They retained a sell-on percentage. I think they didn't come close to maximizing the amount of money they could have realistically gotten from a Liga MX team at the end of the day, because it was a much smaller number than I think we've seen from some things. But it was about, they got the GAM, and that's kind of enough to move on.
Yeah, I'm just sort of mourning that we won't get to see Gutierrez and Salertros and Davila together, because I think that trio would be nasty. But I mean, the roster is good, right? And this gets to the conversation you guys were having. The roster is really good. It's not Miami good. It's not probably Nashville good. It's not LAFC or Vancouver good. It's probably not Seattle or San Diego good. But it's good. Like, it's a really good squad. I think the ceiling this year is below trophy level, ultimately. And that's fine. Like, I'm not a Chicago Fire fan, so maybe I'd feel differently if I was. I think they're on a very reasonably positive trajectory right now, where you went from fringe playoff team last year. You should be flirting with a home field advantage in the first round this year. And if the calendar was already aligned and you could have already gone out and gotten your Lewandowski and maybe even one other DP in this window, the summer window, the offseason window in this reality, then I think you would absolutely be pushing for a trophy this year. But that's just not the reality as constructed. And I think even with a longer second half of the season post-World Cup break this year, I still don't know that whatever moves you get done in the summer are going to be enough to really vault you into that top tier of contenders in either conference. But could it come playoff time? Yeah, it could. Just betting on an MLS Cup win as a low seed, maybe middle tier seed is difficult. But I think this team is very much going to be better this year than last, even if their ceiling is clearly lower as constructed than, I don't know, 6-8 teams in MLS right now. And I think the sprint season timing makes that a whole thing weird. But whatever it is, after this year, they will be even closer to trying to contend for trophies in a real.
So I'm just going to keep on stealing things from American Soccer Analysis because they are really smart. And if they do the work, then I don't have to. And that's really great. So something that Paul Harvey, working with from the outfield, but also working with American Soccer Analysis, looked at was how team schedules line up from before the World Cup to after the World Cup. About 60% of the Fire's season and every MLS team season is after the break. And the Fire have the season, the post-World Cup season, that is the second. It gets harder more than any team other than San Diego's. So San Diego has the biggest jump from before the World Cup to after in terms of difficulty. They are second highest. So it could actually be that with 60% of the year, that may not be enough to take it to that next tier, but it could be enough to help stabilize them if they're able to get points in that first 40% of the season when the schedule is a little bit easier, and sort of like maintain that throughout the second part. Whereas I think before, you might be worried that it would drop off.
Yeah, Joe, I feel like the one bit of pushback I would give, because I don't disagree, right? Like, I think we should have a piece, if it's not out as of recording, it'll be out tomorrow, kind of our staff predictions for the year. And we all pretty much agreed somewhere in that 3 to 6 range. Most of us said 4 or 5. And some kind of either conference semis or conference quarter, somewhere in there. I do think the interesting thing to kind of what you brought up right at the beginning, right? If this is a team that can get up to 4th, maybe 3rd in the East, get home field into the playoffs, outside of Nashville and Miami in the East specifically, there's not a team that I look at and say, oh, that really, really scares me. And I think even looking at last year, this is a team that picked up 3 points on Inter Miami, right? They beat them in Miami. They drew at home 0-0.
Yeah, 4 points, yeah.
And 4 points. Sorry, thank you, Tim. And that draw was before they had made all of the moves they did in the summer. It's I guess the thing I'm getting at here, right, is I would completely agree. I don't think they'll be anywhere near the Supporters Shield. I don't know that you could just kind of carte blanche say they're not going to be up for MLS Cup, right? Because I genuinely feel like once you're in the playoffs, outside of a few
anything
teams,
can
right?
happen.
Anything can happen.
The New York Red Bulls mantra for 15 years when they didn't win MLS Cup.
But when look, I think we would all probably agree the East is still stronger than the West, and there's a chance that the top 3 teams in the East are all top 4 in MLS. And if you find yourself in that group, I think it's possible, right? Is if not likely, of course, but possible.
Yeah, I think actually everything you just said, John, I completely agree with. So either I phrased something poorly before, or we just agree, and maybe I think that their odds of doing what you just said.
I'm feeling combative.
Yeah, let's do it. No, I totally agree. I think Chicago will be a high seed in the playoffs. I think they're probably going to be a slightly worse team than at least Miami and Nashville, and maybe one or two other teams, maybe in the East. The thing I disagree with actually is the East being so clearly stronger than the West. I think the top of the East is still filthy good. The top of the West is insane, man. Like LAFC with a full season of Son and Bouanga, and they've gotten better in midfield. Vancouver with a full season of Muller. San Diego going for round 2. No Lozano, no problem. Seattle without the Club World Cup. I mean, the Galaxy, I don't think are going to be in that top tier, but could they potentially be in a Chicago tier of teams? Maybe. Minnesota, I think I'm way higher in Minnesota than it seems like just about anybody else at the moment. I mean, I think the top of the West is insane. So I don't think we'll see the top of the East stacked that far ahead of the top of the West. But I do think Chicago will be near the top of the East, even if I absolutely have them a tier or 2 below, like the top apex contenders this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is fair to say that in two single elimination games, right? Like we've seen MLS Cups get won that way where a team was hot at exactly the right moment. And I don't think it's an expectation, but I know this isn't what you meant, Joe, but in terms of winning trophies, the current US Open Cup format is pretty favorable for the Fire. And I think that could be a real like potential trophy, and it would be huge for the Fire, the first MLS team to 5 trophy wins, which has been like first to 5 is something that like it's been a rallying cry for the Sounders. I think it's been something that Fire fans have wanted without as realistic of hopes in recent years. And I mean, when you look at the teams that are in it, I think Orlando are probably pretty good. It wouldn't be that surprising if they won it again. Minnesota, I think, I agree with you, Joe. Like, I think that they're better than people are giving them credit for, and I think that they will probably be able to do some things in a knockout competition like that specifically, where it's a finite number of games and a lot of it's not that late in the season. And so if maybe people haven't figured out what the adaptation is of their long throw or whatever it is they're doing, if they stick with some of that. But other than that, I mean, I feel like the Fire should feel pretty confident that they should have reasonable expectations of being able to handle any team. I mean, Charlotte maybe also in that tier. And I mean, the reason I bring that up is the Fire have never qualified for CONCACAF in the sort of like modern iteration of the format. It's something I tried to get, Greg Berhalter to speak about on the record about whether that was a goal for this year. And he said it's a goal. He wasn't going to put a timeline on it. And then after that, he kind of was like, we have internal goals. And so I'm kind of taking that as a yes, but I'm not going to give you a soundbite for it. But I mean, I think that would be huge for the fan base. After, again, like all of the years that CONCACAF Champions League, then CONCACAF Champions Cup, the Fire have never qualified for it. I mean, that's a visceral step forward for the team.
Totally. Yeah, Open Cup feels like it should be within reach this year, right? I mean, I think they would be among the favorites for that competition with what Orlando and Charlotte you mentioned, and Columbus, I know are in it, Minnesota. They feel like they're in that top tier of teams, Chicago, and probably at or near the very tippy top of that top tier.
So, the thing we've seen kind of coming out this week as we start to see more and more power rankings, playoff picks, all things of that nature. Joe, I know you said you haven't finalized yours yet, so I won't ask you to put a number on it. The official MLS power rankings came out today, had the Fire at 9th. And I know you've kind of talked about there in that second tier, which reasonable, right? Super reasonable. Do we feel like 9 is high, low, kind of like just right? It feels like maybe just right based on the way you're talking.
To me, and I'm actually really curious what you guys think, it feels about right. I think I will probably have them higher than that. Right now, I think I have, this is not in a particular order. I would have LAFC, Vancouver, Seattle, and San Diego from the West, and Miami and Nashville from the East, all above Chicago. I probably would have Chicago next after that. So you're looking at them being 7th across those teams. So I guess I'd be slightly higher as things stand than maybe those official power rankings. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Like, it sounds like maybe you're a tinge higher, but not. It seems like we're mostly on the same page here across the board.
It feels like a year. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tim.
No, I think that's basically spot on. Like when I was on SoccerWise doing the Fire season preview, and Andrew Wiebe was setting lines for it, he set the line for the Fire in terms of like finish at, I can't remember, it was 4.5 or 5.5 for their finish in the East. And just thinking through it, I'm like, that's reasonable. And then when you look on the West, I think it's exactly the teams that you listed, that are clearly like the top tier teams where I think their fans would feel disappointed if they didn't make it at least to the conference final, if not MLS Cup. And I think the Fire are not quite in that category of, I don't think anybody's going to be like, well, they didn't win it all this year, and so it's a disappointment. But I feel like it's the sort of like dare to dream category, just behind that.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, Tim. I think for me, it's like you could have them at 5 and you could have them at 12. And I feel like I would have a really hard time like disagreeing either way. The fan in me is going to say 12 is way too low. But like the reasonable person is like, that's kind of like, and part of it is you're plugging in a lot of new pieces and you're asking for a lot of young guys to step up and you're asking for a lot of Jonathan Bamba to learn how to score goals, right? And
something like that is a challenge. And at the same time, we talked about this a bunch on the pod already, but like Philip Zinkernagel outperformed his XG by an insane number. Bamba underperformed, and then you've added some pieces with Loden. And I think Siletros is going to do more on both sides of the ball than with the Fire really getting from that position last year, and like that probably helps. But I mean, is that going to be enough to make up for the departure of Brian Gutierrez? And just reversion to normal human numbers from Philip Zinkernagel. Like, I don't know.
And towards the end of last year, a theme we saw really consistently was really impressive set piece and corner and set piece delivery and conversion. Right, it was one of, if not maybe the only team ahead of them was Minnesota. They led in corner kicks, but not in set pieces, if I remember right. And now you're adding Anton Saletros, who that's what he does, right? Like he is, the in that way the Kellen Acosta of the Swedish league, right? Very very proficient set piece taker. He's already put one in from the spot in sorry in preseason. On top of, we saw Jay Davila getting more comfortable. Mbezeli Mbuaze is a guy who seems to be able to finish from distance, and so you're wondering how much of that is. Wow, this and Tim, you're going to have to remind me of the set piece coach's name because it bothers me that I can't remember it.
Ryan Needs. You need
Yeah,
Ryan Needs. You need to remember
Ryan
his name. Yeah.
Ryan doesn't want goals. Ryan needs goals. That's how you remember it. No, but how much of this is Ryan Needs is, maybe singularly a fantastic set piece coach, and how much of it is a little bit of not random, right? But okay, you had your year of we weren't ready for what you had, and now we have a full season of tape and we can adjust better.
Yeah.
Well, the nice thing about, Saletros getting into the mix too is that now the Fire have a left-footed and a right-footed option, for taking those corners, and that's useful when you have corners on both sides of the pitch. So,
I do want to point out, Tim, they were taking in swinging and out swinging corners in preseason.
Yeah,
Nothing. It was not,
and you can do both.
Time.
No, exactly. And like having that versatility, I think just makes things a little bit harder. It adds another beast to the mix because they're not going to be exactly the same cogs in a machine. And I think that, could add a lot. Again, I think the question just becomes if there's regression towards the mean, and then the Fire, honestly, they're a very average at age team in MLS this year, I think, when you look at the numbers, but the way that they get there is weird, where there's not as many sort of like mid-central prime guys that are like 26, 27, 28 years old. It's a bunch of guys that are very young and a bunch of guys that are over 30. And so the over 30s, including Philip Zinkernagel, I think that you start to have questions about the injury concern. But just going back to something you said, I need to know what Saletros' trash talking on the pitch ability is before I'm ready to call him the Swedish Kellen Acosta.
Good point. Can he scuff up a penalty spot? Can he do it? Is he willing to get in somebody's face before a shootout? That's what we need to know.
I mean,
great.
I've got a Swedish source that I talked to that gave me a 2-word scouting report on Saletros when he got here, which was just I translated from Swedish. I had to look it up. I don't speak Swedish. Really good, which like they don't say nice things like that in Sweden. It's not part of their culture.
Yeah,
But I need to ask about that trash talking ability. Like, hey, do you guys do that the same way over there? And like, what would that look? Do you like talk about locks or something, or like you can't even like assemble furniture? Is that
right?
Like
I was going to do an IKEA bit.
Yeah.
Yep, you beat me to it, Tim. Well played. Yeah, I mean, on Saletros, I've heard similarly positive things from people about him. I've seen zero of him. Just. There's a lot of teams in this league, which means there's a lot of players in this league. But I think Chicago this new regime has earned a lot of benefit of the doubt when it comes to these signings, man. Like even maybe the best example of this is Davila, who looked, I think you said it well, John, he looked a little lost for a couple months there. I love that dude. I'm super high on Davila as a player. I think he's one of the toolsiest number 6s in all of MLS, where he's a capable distributor. He's shown an ability to play under pressure. He can turn out of pressure. He's got the frame to drive the ball forward with his carrying. He can pass the ball forward as well through the lines. He's pretty sharp, or showed moments last year of being sharp after the ball turns over, of going and winning it back, and he's capable of covering ground in the press. I think he's got all the tools to be like a Europa League level number 6 for a team in a Big 5 league. Obviously, will he put it all together? That is the big question. But man, I'm juiced about getting to watch him this year, especially now that there's a little bit more stability behind him for a full season with Elliott and Waterman, who I think is a really, really good center back pairing. I just, of all the teams, nobody asked me this question, but this is how I feel. Of all the teams in MLS this year, there are very, very few that I'm more excited to watch than Chicago.
Yeah, people don't believe me when I say this, but if you're a neutral, watching the Chicago Fire is probably awesome. One of the best bets in MLS.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, especially if for, whatever reason you're not feeling like, well, let's watch Lionel Messi do Lionel Messi things in MLS, which, I think that there's people on both sides of that. But amongst other things, last year, Miami and the Fire were the teams where you'd have seen the most goals as a neutral between goals for and goals against. And if your neutral goals are fun, hopefully the goals against goes down for the Fire this year. But I'm completely with you on Jade Avila. Like he wears Yaya Touré's number. That's an intentional choice on his part.
I never
Alex
put that
Calabrese
together.
from
Yeah,
Minute.
that's a good call.
Yeah. No, Alex Calabrese interviewed him about it. It's like, yep, that's why. Which, I mean, is a show of a certain amount of confidence when you think about it. But playing in a similar position, I mean, it's hard to say that his ceiling is Yaya Touré's, but he's obviously not shying away from the comparison. So I think that that's kind of a good sign for Jade Avila. And like the in-season improvement we saw from him last year was just massive, like absolutely massive.
Joe, you said it well. He's the one of, if not the toolsiest kind of six, or you could argue defender in MLS. Like he has it all there. It's just a question of whether he can do it. And he showed flashes of it, right? In 2025, you saw towards the end of the season, he looked like he could be that guy. And it's great to see. Greg talked about bringing one of the guys we didn't mention before because it was kind of last minute, and he don't expect to see him too much. Puso Ditajane, another South African coming over from TS Galaxy. Greg commented on, hey, we did kind of consciously bring both of these guys together so they would, in a way, have somebody else who was familiar with their culture and kind of knew each other. I love Jay, and now he and Boise seem to be very, very good friends. They're hanging out all the time. They're riding around in cars in the city together. Joe, you're welcome to use this at some point. I've been calling them the Bash Brothers. I think that's going to stick. And that is a Mighty Ducks reference, not a 1980s Oakland A's reference, just for the record. No, but it is exciting, and with that structure around him, I think you could see him really take that next step. Kind of good transition there, and maybe you guys both just answered the question, but I think we've talked about kind of where we think the Fire will finish. We've talked about the potential of silverware. We're all kind of in agreement. Open Cup seems to be the way to go. So the question I would love to get an answer on, and it's okay if you said, well, I just answered, kind of who you're watching on this team in 2026, or who you're excited to watch. I'll say it like that.
Yeah, for me, Davila is number one, and I don't think it's especially close. I'm curious to see what Bamba's got in the bag this year, because obviously he was disappointing last year. Can he make up the difference that you're probably going to lose with Zinchenko? Like we've already talked about, it seems like everybody's on the same page that you're not going to get that season from him 2 seasons in a row. So can Bamba make up the difference there? The other player I'm really curious to watch is Andre Franco. And you guys know better than me. When should I be expecting to get to do that, fella?
What Greg told us when we asked was after the World Cup break. Now, that's obviously everything after July is after the World Cup break. Exactly. So 2029 is after the World Cup break. Yeah. But I think the implication was sooner after rather than later. But obviously with ACL injuries, there's all the question marks around that, right? Of, is it the same player? Will that timeline actually hold? I mean, LA Galaxy fans, they're still probably crying about that very understandably. But I think it is exciting. I mean, I keep on going back. It's insane how few minutes Andre Franco actually played for the Fire last year.
Like 400, 500 region?
Yeah. And he was able to change the way the team played. I mean, there was a formation shift at the same time, switching to, playing with 3 center backs. So whatever we're going to call that, like a 5-3-2. Like there's different ways of looking at it. But what it essentially did is it meant the Fire could take out a midfielder and put in another center back. And it really only worked when Franco was in, because he was able to really control the pace of the games and set the tone for the offense and avoid the Fire from getting in dangerous situations. They tried it after Franco's injury, and it really never worked out. Like their only wins after that point came playing out of some variation of, 4 in the back. And I think that Greg prefers to play with 4 in the back, but having that tool is useful. I think that with Franco, it worked. I think with Load and Celetros, it'll probably work, but it's such a small sample size that it's really hard for me not to get over my skis with it, because it was just a handful of games, and you don't want, like, if you ask me right now, I would say that he was putting up DP level performances, and that's the thing the Fire could expect when he comes back. But it's such a small sample size that I'm not really sure that I can say that with a ton of confidence and not sound like I'm crazy.
Well, and you shouldn't say it with a ton of confidence, because he's a guy who's barely played soccer for the last 3 years of his life and just came off an ACL tear, right? Like that everything you said about how good he was is true. That he was amazing on the field for Chicago. It's just hard to say whether he's going to get back to that or not. I think the nice thing about this situation for the Fire is they don't really need him. Like, I mean, maybe if the summer goes perfectly, and I have a question for you guys about that actually, but maybe if the summer goes perfectly, and oh wow, holy crap, we are in the Shield race, or wow, we actually can really load up for MLS Cup because Messi just came down with gout. I don't know. That is going to be a great opportunity to get Andre Franco back. Yeah, I don't know what the deal is going to be there, but I mean, if you're in a situation where you suddenly do have a path to a trophy, then okay, maybe you need Andre Franco and you really need to count on him. But I don't think in a realistic scenario, this team is built to have to get production from Franco, which is a good place to be in all the way across the board. He is a guy that I have hope for, and I think is going to be very good when he comes back. But of course, as you said, Tim, there is that little kernel of doubt.
I think putting on both my conservative and like Homer meatball hat, like Tim, I agree. Timeline wise, I expect to see him towards the end of 2026, potentially around Leagues Cup would be interesting, just to kind of have a way to work him back in. I think if you want to see like very good Andre Franco getting back to who we thought he was going to be last year, I would look at that sprint season in 2027 and say, if you're picking somebody who you want to maximize your returns, if you are a gambler and or market predictor on a sprint season MVP, I don't know, man. I don't know. No, I just, with an ACL tear, it's like, I would much rather say whatever you get this year is gravy. Look to 2027 and beyond in terms of when he'll actually be himself and contributing to the team. Joe, you made a really good point there, right? Like, Robin Lod is a guy who gave you 20 goal contributions a year ago, right? In 2024, he's a very talented MLS player, and he doesn't need to be the guy. He just gets to be the fourth member of that attacking, group, right?
100%.
Yeah.
And
now, actually, you brought up the Leagues Cup. That's something we didn't actually talk about that much, and I don't even think it was really on the outline. But I mean, look, it just is such a punishing format, right? Like, if you don't play perfectly, like, you could not lose. You could get 2 wins and a draw and not make it at the group stage, right? So that's challenging. My gut feeling is it's irrational to expect the Fire to advance, and if they do advance far. And I almost think that like maybe you shouldn't even really try to, right? Just with when that is in the season, like you said, John, like try working Franco back into things, almost like that was a competition that didn't matter, even though clearly for teams that have won it, it seems like it does really matter to them. I'm just curious about how the Fire are going to take it, because I think rationally you don't look at it as something that you really need to compete in, because you don't have a very good chance of winning it. And you do have a chance of winning the Open Cup. You do have a chance of getting positioning for a better playoff run. But, talking to Greg about it, he's like, look, I love playing teams in Mexico. So, like, I think that there is maybe going to be some emotion from that, from a lot of different ways of just the competition in front of you, facing teams you don't get to face. And I'm just curious about how the Fire approach it and how they should approach it.
Yeah, I think, Joe, I'm going to assume you agree with me. Maybe you don't. Like in that, I'm with you, Tim, on it's a brutal format, and so counting on getting out of that is just not. It's not worth doing, right? It's such a difficult, and who knows, with the way this league works, they could change it, 2 days before. But I do think the maybe the benefit the Fire have is they haven't competed in Leagues Cup in recent memory, right? It's been a few years, and so who knows?
A year,
maybe
but yeah.
these teams, you know what I mean.
Yeah,
to say.
it was just a very long 2025.
It was a very long 2025, but there's not a ton of like, Liga MX has never faced this team, right? So there is a little bit of that if you're looking for something to cling to there. But I think generally speaking, yeah, the format's very difficult. And to Joe's point, you will still have Nashville and Miami and Vancouver and LAFC and Seattle, who now don't have all these other games to worry about. And everybody's kind of coming off a break with the World Cup, so I'd be surprised.
This is not Leagues Cup related, because if I'm being honest, I don't even know what the format is of Leagues Cup. That's a problem for future me.
Yeah.
Can I ask you guys, actually, let me say one thing first, and then I have a question. My one thing is, the other player I'm looking forward to watching, because I'm sick, is Marin Haile Selassie, who I think is one of the best backup wingers in MLS. The contract's probably not quite cheap enough for a bunch of people to come knocking about him, but I still kind of think they should, because that dude is good enough to start on like at least a third of the teams in this league.
Joe,
yeah,
not to interrupt, when you were
please.
talking about Guti with selling him on to get some GAM, my initial thought was you could, maybe not for $5 million, you could sell Marin Haile Selassie and get a good chunk of GAM in terms of the conversion.
I would certainly think so.
The one challenge with that, and this is something that, only Fire sickos know because it's only really come up for the Fire, for odd tax reasons that I don't fully explain, that have been told that this is true by people that actually know what they're talking about here. Uh, Swiss players typically will never want to get a green card because it has massive bad financial implications for them. So Shaqiri didn't. Mar and Haile Selassie is not in line to get one either, and that means that it's also an international slot. And I think that especially the way that you put it, I think is perfect. Like, he's the best backup. I don't know what you do with that. Like, I don't know that Marn feels great, going to bed at night thinking I'm the best backup at this position in MLS.
Probably not.
And I think that he's too good to not be getting minutes, right? But I think at the same time, international slot plus his salary makes it hard to see where a lot more minutes would come. And so, I mean, I don't know, right? Like, he's one of the players where I've almost wished that a move would happen just for his sake, in terms of, I don't think that fans, like people that are paying to watch a game, will get to see the most that Martin Haile Selassie can provide if he's on the Fire roster, just because he's not going to be on the pitch enough. And I just don't know what to do with that,
I mean, it's a great spot to be in for the Fire. This is the kind of depth that we look at Seattle and Miami and talk about how important it is for a long season. And the seasons are long, and they're going to need that depth. So, I mean, I think it's amazing. And that he can play wingback as well if you do need to shift the shape. Yeah, he's a really, really, really useful MLS player. The question I wanted to ask you guys, so we've heard all the links. We've heard Lewandowski. We've heard Bernardo Silva. It sure seems like the Fire are going to add one piece as a DP this summer. Let's say it's Lewandowski, whether that's the most likely outcome or not. If that happens, then they're going to move Kuipers. Do they add a third DP in that same window, or do they kind of hold pat? Like, that's the thing that I haven't really heard anybody talk about or write about yet, is what the last domino would be if they do in fact go get Lewandowski and move on from Hugo Kuipers.
So we've talked about Lewandowski a lot on the pod. I think John and I are more skeptical than a lot of people of it working out. Not so much that it's happening, because I mean, it's the cat is out of the bag. There have been real, very serious discussions. This isn't them just kind of like kicking the tires. This isn't an agent trying to play games. It happens to MLS teams sometimes. Like, this is substantial. I was talking to Alex about this in a group chat the other day, and I don't know why I didn't vocalize it this way, but the challenge is he basically said, he's going to be one of the best players who arrive in the league. He's going to be like Zlatan, or he is going to be Giroud, and he's not going to be anywhere in between. So he's either going to be really impactful instantly, or he's not going to do very much at all because of age and stuff like that. My fear is that you get 6 months of him being an absolutely elite player, and then age catches up with him, or whatever else happens, and then you've got a sprint season, and season, whatever you want to call it, of him basically being on a bench as, Polish fans in Chicago get increasingly mad at the Fire for not playing him 90 minutes every game, and that's that. So I think we haven't wanted to see Lewandowski here as much as maybe some people, just from that point of view. But having put that out there, I honestly don't know where you have to upgrade at that point, right? Like, that's the challenge. Like, I would normally say in MLS you go and get like a better 10, but you've already got a better 10 coming back to the squad with Franco. And that's the challenge I was talking about, where it's like, this is a very good team. It doesn't feel like it's elite at a lot of places, but I don't know what you subtract to really be able to add in a definitive way, right?
We talked about it kind of early, kind of when the Lewandowski news kind of broke initially, right? And I think if you look at this roster and you said, okay, I can just for free cut two players and sign two guys for any amount of money I want, I think both guys you cut are the DPs, and not in a negative way. Like, Hugo Kuipers, I think personally is like a top 5 or 6 center forward in MLS. But could you get better than Hugo Kuipers for $30 million? Like, of course you could, right? There are better players out there. Jonathan Bamba, we talk a lot about, he's very good at the dirty work. He's great at connecting play. He does hold up well defensively, but that's not, to Tim's always saying, that's
you
not
don't pay $5.5 million a year for that. Yeah.
So it's like, if you're looking at, okay, what's that next move? That next move might be, how do we find an exit for Jonathan Bamba and go sign not Mo Salah, right, but a left winger who is at an incredibly high level, or another winger like on the right side, and let Philip Zingernagel play centrally until Andre Franco returns. But then it's this, you're kind of back in that mishmash of, now we've got all these players and we don't know what to do with everything.
Yeah, and I think that you're right. I was thinking about that. It's like that is the obvious move, right? Of like, if you look at it not as roster slots, but a pile of money, I think that it's what you do with the pile of money, assuming that Bamba hasn't started scoring goals at the rate that I think every coach that he's ever had in his entire life is convinced they can get him to do, and it hasn't happened across multiple leagues and multiple continents. So assuming that doesn't happen, I think that that would kind of be the move, because that is the place where you can obviously upgrade without really downgrading that much. I mean, the other side of it, I guess, would be depending on how Zinkernagel's performing. If he's really crashed down harder to earth than I think I would expect, maybe you look there and say, okay, then it's an all DP attack trio. Like, I don't know.
The interesting thing there, Joe, too, would be, do you keep Hugo Kuipers and make Robert Lewandowski the third designated player and play with two strikers? Because that is, I mean, you would have Hugo more for the pressing and more active role. You would have Lewandowski there to be the finisher. That, to me, is something that's very, very interesting, and maybe not talked about quite enough. I think it's worth at least having the conversation around.
Yeah, I think that setup would work in MLS, and I think I disagree with what you said, Tim, about he's either going to be Zlatan or he's going to be Giroud. I mean, I think there really is a lot of room in the middle there, but the odds are we're probably not going to see it anyway, right? So it maybe doesn't matter. But I think Lewandowski's so skilled that you could play him and sort of give him a slightly freer role next to Kuipers, and all of a sudden you're cooking with gas. The thing is, I think maybe other than like one Gold Cup game randomly, I think Berhalter's really never done the two striker setup thing, and I don't know that I would imagine he would start now. But, I mean, signing Lewandowski would be a pretty good reason to start now. I mean, you guys have summed it up well, right? There's not an obvious, oh, well, yes, it needs to be in this spot kind of thing. And I would imagine Chicago are keeping the powder dry for the summer of, we don't know what we're going to do. Maybe we do nothing if Miami are too far out ahead of everybody else. Maybe we do something and we just go for it now. The nice thing, even though, okay, I guess I'm glad to know that I don't know the answer to this question, and it sounds like nobody really knows the answer to this question of what would happen with a third DP spot. I was going to say something else, I completely forgot what it was, so I'm going to just decrescendo my point now because I'm a pro. Good chat, guys. That was great.
No, it's true though. It's a weird spot for the roster to be in, and you mentioned like this summer coming in. Like, this hasn't happened because the window's Robert Lewandowski intends to finish in Spain. Blah blah blah. I think the Fire are not also like chomping at the bit to get this done. Tim, you can correct me because you actually report things. If you told me like the Fire ended up, oh my gosh, shock pivot, Mo Salah does become available, and we go sign Mo Salah and move Jonathan Bottle, like that wouldn't surprise me at all, right? And I have no reason to believe that's happening. I'm just saying.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that we've talked about this on the pod, that the Fire did have some conversation with Mo Salah. They didn't go very far. He's the one player that I really hoped Heights could bring in, because Heights was the guy that helped him get to Europe in the first place. And he's the one guy that Heights didn't help bring in. So we are where we are with that. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think that I would rather have a Mo Salah, going forward than I would Robert Lewandowski. I mean, I don't know, right? Like it's becoming, we've talked about this too with the changes in GAM now accumulating. You're starting to see this idea of like there being windows of contention for teams in ways in MLS where there weren't, where you kind of like had to reset your salary at a certain point. And now teams can hoard money and start spending it when they think the window's open. I don't know if Lewandowski arrives in the right time for the window to really be there in Chicago, between how good Miami is, between his age and those things combining. I don't know. But I mean, you talked about the sprint season. Like that almost just seems like if you're just going to go for it, if you think you're like a little bit short of what you need to win a trophy and you just want to go for it, like that just seems like the time when it's like all bets are off, sort of like last chance saloon of just going for it, because it's going to be such a short season that it's almost like a weighted random number generator.
Yeah. Look, I think we have, I don't want to say talked it to death because there's a lot to talk about there. I do think we're pushing an hour here and we still got to talk about Houston. So I am making an executive decision. As much as I am enjoying the conversation, it is time to pivot a little bit here. Last moments, fellas. Actually, Tim, keep it short, but I do need your player to watch. I realized I didn't get that.
I'm going to say, man, I don't want to say somebody that somebody else has said. You said Bomba already, right?
Come on. I have not said anything yet.
You can have him.
Okay, well, then I'll say Joe Bomba. If Joe Bomba's doing really well, then that says a lot of really great things about where the team is going to be doing.
True. I'm gonna split the hedge and go with two, and I'm gonna say I think there is a real chance if Philip Zinkernagel regresses, that Hugo Kuipers picks up a large chunk of those goals, and I think you could see him contending for a Golden Boot. Maybe it's the runner-up Golden Boot because Messi is Messi. My real answer is Leonardo Barroso, and I think we talked about Jay. There's a lot of hype behind Mbawaze. I think there's a very real chance that Leo ends up being sold off first. He is a freaking bulldog. He's incredibly strong. He's incredibly fast, and if he can just be a little smarter, I think he could be fantastic. Like just next level in terms of production, and he has the defensive capabilities that Andrew
his 1v1 is something that we didn't see enough of, but he's got it. Yeah.
Yeah, he has the potential to really slide out there. So I say all that to say, let's talk a little bit of where the stars at night shine big and bright. Going on down to Houston. The big question mark, I think, for the Fire in this game is who's actually going to play. We saw Andrew Gutman, Jonathan Bamba, and Hugo Kuipers all missing time in the preseason. Hugo with a concussion. Tim, I don't know if you have an update on if he's out of protocol. I expect we'll hear from Greg later this week. Bamba and Gutman, both more soft tissue, lower body injuries that we are still waiting for updates on.
Yep, I don't have an update from that. I'm planning on going to training later this week, but have not had time to this week.
Yeah. So as it stands, 3 starters potentially out for this game. I expect to see at least 2 of them on the field.
Yeah, I've been told to expect them back. Now, obviously, that's also just what you say, right? So I don't know how much I'd put in that, but I would be more surprised if all 3 didn't play than anything else, to be honest.
Absolutely. The other interesting piece here, the Fire, pending that Omari Glasgow move as well, we'll have 2 open supplemental roster slots. So we'll kind of keep an eye there. Vitaly Liu was training with the first team. We've seen some other guys make the jump. There are some other rumors floating around there. We haven't talked about Johan Gomez. I don't think we will talk about Johan Gomez unless it happens. But who knows? Who knows? Fire playing in that more 4-2-3-1. I actually kind of think we've talked the Fire to death, and Houston is kind of the more interesting side of this. Today, even breaking some news that Dynamo are selling the wingback Griffin Dorsey to Orlando for $1 million in GAM after bringing in a few big names. You know, talk about a team like Austin kind of recycling some old MLSers, bringing back Hector Herrera, Mateus Bogusz coming in after a not as stellar stint at Cruz Azul, and Guilherme from Brazil, who Joe, you may be a little more familiar with the outlook for Houston than I am. This feels like a lot of splashes that are not splashes, if that makes sense. It's like big moves, but who knows how big this is really going to be.
You're dropping rocks in a pond, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think splashes that really aren't that splashy feels about right. I mean, Guilherme is a 30-year-old designated player who's not really produced ever, and that's across time in Brazil and in Saudi Arabia, and just doesn't seem like a guy that's going to move the needle. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I mean, this is true of everybody in these positions in MLS. These guys will forget more about soccer than I'll know, right? So they know things, they've seen things, they understand things that I don't, but I also don't understand. So that's just what I'm going to say. Their other big offseason incoming signing in the attack is Mateus Bogusz, who had a really good season with LAFC, earned a move to Cruz Azul, didn't produce at all, really, at Cruz Azul, and then Houston paid a ton of money to get him back in MLS. I think Bogusz is a good MLS player. Like, I buy him as a well above average starting player in this league. I wouldn't have spent $7 million. I don't have the number in front of me. They spent a lot of money on him, and I probably wouldn't make him a DP, to be totally honest with you. I just think the attack as it's constructed makes no sense, really. I mean, they don't have a playmaker for Ponce, which is what they've needed since Ben Olsen came in. They recruited over why has the name just escaped me? They recruited over Lawrence Anali, the U22 winger, who is lightning fast and has looked amazing whenever he's been on the field. He's probably not a guy you want to have to start 34 games this year, but spending a DP in the same spot where you need that guy to play seems odd to me.
Weird. Yeah.
It is weird. This team is old based off of how they've recruited. They brought in a guy named Buzat from Argentina, who was a captain down there and I think looks like a really good player actually, but is old. They brought Hector Herrera back in. They've reinforced the back line a little bit, and then you also mentioned moving on from Griffin Dorsey, so now there's an open hole at right back for this team. I mean, I just don't see it. Like, is this team looking better now than they did last year? Yeah, probably. But are they looking a lot better? I'm not convinced, man.
So
it feels.
I got a question. Can Jack McGlynn play right back? Because like I'm just thinking
Absolutely
like
not.
Okay,
because I'm confused about the. Well, this gets at
Tim
like the
and
way the
Alex
roster's
trying
built,
to get
right? Like
midfielders to play fullback is their favorite
there's
thing.
yeah, no. Alex had a whole thing about Kellen Acosta having played it like once when he was coming up to the
I'm
academy
actually
in
kind of
Dallas.
into that, I gotta say. I'm a little bit into
No,
that.
I'm disappointed we didn't get to see it. I've never seen Frank Klopas shut down an idea as quickly as he shut that down. He's like, come on, no. Um, but like they've got like 5 guys that can play that same kind of role in central midfield. They've got like two of their highest profile attackers play the same spot in the left wing, and they just got rid of like one of like I don't know if Negri I thought is more of a left back. I guess maybe he's a right back on the depth chart. So it's like their only natural right back on the roster they got rid of. Maybe they'll bring somebody in, but like it's Tuesday night when we're recording, and they haven't done that yet. So it's not going to be a lot of time to get the guy integrated, even if it's from within MLS.
Yeah, it's messy, man. Like there's just a lot of same in this roster. You mentioned it with Herrera and McGlynn and Artur and Buzat. Like all those guys can plainly double pivot. And then you're in the half spaces, and there's a bunch of half space kind of merchants on this team. There's not a winger that you feel great about other than I love Anali. I think he's amazing. I think Ponce is very much not a DP level 9 in this league at all. Goalkeeper is a huge problem, where Jonathan Bond is their starter. He's probably the worst goalkeeper in MLS. And center back is like not a real strength. Maybe it's not an obvious weakness either. But I mean, this just isn't a good team. That's the reality. There's a world in which everything clicks and Ben Olsen gets his team humming and they're like a 7 seed in the West. But every other world there are a lot more worlds where that doesn't happen, and they all end up with Houston finishing lower.
It feels like this is a team where the parts would do better if they were playing on bunches of different teams and you were just playing them in fantasy. Like I hadn't put that together until just now. But it's like, yeah, like Jack McGlynn. It's like, oh wait, because who's getting the minutes at that spot? It's like, is it going to be Jack McGlynn getting the minutes at the number 10 role? Is it going to be Bogusz? Like, is it going to be like I just don't know, and I just can't see it all happening at the same time.
It does feel weird that you go and spend all that money on Jack McGlynn, and it's like, all right, time to build around Jack McGlynn, and then you don't.
Yeah.
Joe, one thing I want to point out, and I may be misremembering, but my intentions are correct, so don't hate me if I am. A quick shout. I'll mention this again in the outro. Joe put together for Backheeled previews of all 30 MLS clubs. So if you're trying to get a feel for what a given opponent is going to do on a given week, it's a great resource. Would recommend giving it a read. Or if you really are just full sicko mode, just read them all at once. Kind of whatever you feel is best.
Joe, how many words is it all together? Do you know?
I never did the full tally because I did it in like the tabs function of Google Docs, and apparently you can't word count every tab at once, which makes no sense to me. But I mean, we're probably pushing 50,000 words, yeah. Which, if I'm honest, I'm embarrassed about. But if that made your heart flutter a little bit, listener, then maybe you should come check it.
100. If you don't have a Backheeled subscription and that made your heart do anything, then you need to give them a few bucks a month for a Backheeled subscription. Yeah.
Absolutely, please do, and like I said, go read it, go look at it.
Thanks,
it's stuff well worth contributing to. But Joe, I say all that because if I'm remembering correctly from your kind of Houston breakdown, there was kind of a point about this is not necessarily going to play like a typical Ben Olsen team, and I'm kind of curious to get your thoughts on what we could expect to see, like play style wise, formation wise, when Houston actually lines up.
Yeah, I mean the Dorsey move confuses me because he was kind of the pillar of sort of how they set up in possession. But I mean, really, it's gone. I think it went underrated last year because Houston were bad. But the first 2 years of Ben Olsen being in Houston, that was Ache and Coco Carrasquilla kind of running the show in a lot of respects, and good old pragmatic Ben Olsen who came from DC. All of a sudden, the pragmatic choice was to let those amazing soccer players use the ball to do cool stuff, right? So they became this team that dominated MLS in terms of possession. Like they were in the top third, higher than that quite often in terms of possession share. And then last year, they dropped in that metric a little bit, and they did become a little bit more, I guess what we think of automatically as being pragmatic, where they just weren't quite as in control of possession all the time. They were just about average when it came to their on-ball stuff last year. And I think that's... Man, I think that's sort of the deal with Houston right now. Is that I don't really know that they know exactly who they want to be. And maybe they address that this offseason, and when we all see it on the field over the weekend, we're going to be like, oh, wow, this actually does make sense. I was wrong about this. We were all wrong about this. I'm skeptical of that, obviously, because my opinion is my opinion. But, I mean, the thing, I mentioned Jack McGlynn. I know, John, you asked me about the macro, but I think this helps explain the macro. They trade for Jack McGlynn from the Union when they lose Ache, right? So they're looking for an Ache replacement. And they get Jack McGlynn, and Pat Onstad, the CSO in Houston, says, he's our Hector Herrera replacement. Like, he can do a lot of those same things, and he's right. Like, that was a good read. I think that was a good talent ID of Jack McGlynn to say he can play in the double pivot and pick passes like Hector Herrera can. Are they the same player? No. Can they do some similar things? Yes. And then you get a third of the way in the season, and they move him out of the double pivot, and they move him into the half spaces. Like, the plan was there, and then you deviated from it. So either your original plan was bad, maybe, or your deviation was wrong, or somewhere in between. But there's no like logical progression that I can follow with Houston. Again, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. But so you asked me about the tactical stuff. It's blurrier than it's been since Ben Olsen got there. Like, where are the pieces going? How ball dominant are they going to be? Probably shading towards that side of things, but in a game against Chicago, maybe not, because don't know that they've got the pieces to really leave themselves so exposed. They're not going to be a crazy high pressing team. I don't get that sense. I mean, it's hard to do that when Jack McGlynn's in your squad, unless all the other guys around him are dogs like they were in Philly. But it's just going to be different. So my answer is it's harder to tell than it's been in years in Houston.
Yeah.
I think this weekend is going to tell us a lot.
Yeah, I was just not sure how they were going to play, like, honestly, because the Fire played them in 2023 in the Open Cup, in 2024 in the regular season. Like, that edition of the Houston Dynamo were really good and fun to watch. Every time I watched the Dynamo last year, I was just sad a little bit. I mean, just because they were not the same that they were in those first couple seasons. And I have no clue how this is going to look. I really don't.
Yeah,
it's murky.
I mean, to just tack another piece of promo here, Joe also had a piece for Backheeled, 10 MLS predictions for 2026, and we talked about it a little bit beforehand. In that, you do choose Houston to be bottom of the West, right? And I think you were maybe
I would
waffling.
I would trade them. I would trade them for SKC now. That was a shortcoming on my part around the holidays, but I mean, it's in the ballpark.
Even with the Dynamo now without a right back,
it's like
yeah.
I mean. Well, actually, is Rafa Wiki in the United States yet? Does anyone know?
Rafa Wiki is in the United States. Yeah, absolutely is.
Good,
but
good.
Not a lot of other pieces in Kansas City are, which is why. Like, I mean, I believe
it's Rafa
in the
Wiki hanging
Kansas...
out with Justin Reynolds, and that's it.
Yeah, it's a good squad. You know, I believe
Joe,
in the SKC project more than the Houston project, but Houston will be better this season. That's how.
So, Joe, if I set Chicago Fire possession at 65.5%, would you take the over or under there for Saturday?
I would take the under for sure. I think Houston will do some stuff with the ball, but Chicago especially with how much Chicago built from the back last year. Like, I know they didn't dominate the possession numbers, but they did dominate the passes inside their own third. So I would think it's going to be a little tighter.
Okay, gotcha. The one piece we haven't mentioned here, I do feel obligated to, as somebody who is kind of the spokesperson for USL to MLS transitions. Nick Markanich coming back from Spain on loan.
Yep.
Former NIU and USL standout. It was 28 goals, something like that, a few years ago in the championship. I don't know what we'll see, but I wanted to get it on record that he is
another position where they just have like too many guys.
Another left winger. Yeah,
I don't get it, man. I truly, really don't get it. And I would like to be wrong because there's a lot of pieces in this team that I like. Like, I liked Bogusz at LAFC. I like McGlynn a lot. I think he's a fun player. Probably not going to be around after the World Cup. Maybe he is. I don't know. I think there's some interest. Andrade at left back is like one of the fastest players in MLS. I think he's a good young player. There are some fun things here. Anali is the most fun of them all, and I just don't know that it's going to work.
I think that kind of brings us to a natural point, which is, it's the part of the show where I ask you the question that needs to be asked because it's the question that we ask. Joe, I'm going to start with you on this one. Actually, I'll start with Tim, just so you can get the format right, okay? Tim, who's your spark for Saturday night? And, of course, who you got?
I am going to say the spark is Robin Lod. We saw him in preseason and how good he was. I think that having him in that attacking midfield role can do a lot to change the tenor of the games. And, I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm going to say the Fire are going to win 3-1. It would be the first time the Fire will have won their season opener since 2009.
Yeah, that's, 17 years.
Yes.
Joe, your spark, your guy to watch, and if you wouldn't mind giving us your pick.
I'm going to say my spark is Salertros. Can I say Salertros? Is that allowed?
Yeah,
okay.
100%.
And there's going to be some set-piece magic while we're doing predictions. That's just what I'm going to say.
Oh, yeah.
And the Fire are going to win 2-0.
Prediction. I like that. I've gone back and forth on this, and I'm still trying to formulate in my head. I actually think very good chance it's Jack Elliott, the captain. Kind of. To your point, if Salatros is putting some free kicks out there, I think Jack Elliott could be the guy finishing them. If Salatros doesn't do it himself, so I like Jack Elliott. Plus, I think now he has a more competent defensive cast around him. That'll be helpful. And I'm going Fire 4-1. Like I don't think this team is going to be able to keep up once the ball starts rolling. But who knows? Who knows? I could see it a lot of ways. I'm also just excited for MLS to be back, to be totally candid.
Let's go.
Again, love the energy, Joe. This is what we need. I'm going to start showing this to all our guests when they come on. It's like, yeah, you got to match this. If you're not raising it, don't even bother. That does bring us kind of to the end of the show. We thank you for sticking around through what is an extra long episode here, but all great stuff. Massive thank you again, Joe, for being here, for joining us. We've talked about Backheeled quite a bit. If you want to kind of give the people a place to find you and anything else you'd like to plug while we have you.
No, I mean, you can find my writing over at backheeled.com. That's probably a better place than social media these days, so I would encourage people to go there. You guys have been great. Thanks for all the nice things you said, the checks in the mail, and thanks for having me.
There we go. The other piece I'll shout out because I should have earlier and didn't. While we're talking about independent news coverage, I want to give a quick shout out to Matt Doyle, who is working independently now. His newsletter at tacticsfreezone.com. I think you guys can probably both speak to this better than I could, but I'll keep it simply and let you guys say what you'd like to. One of the best there is. It's a shame that he's now doing it independently, but I do think that can hopefully offer some, frankly, just great coverage and offer him some new opportunities as well. But I'll let you guys talk about it too.
Go for it, Tim.
Yeah. I mean, he's been one of the best analysts of the game for 15 years across MLS, and I think a lot of people that are writing about the game, including myself, have been very heavily influenced by not just like his analysis, because that is all absolutely top right, but his prose and his writing style too. So he's unofficial friend of the pod. He's never been on, but he's certainly someone that has been around and talking to us. And I look, giving $50 for his coverage is just another no-brainer in this league. Like he's so smart, it's so worth it. And he covers the entire league in, I think, a pretty interesting way. And he started doing some interesting stuff with like rankings and stuff like that. And I'm sure that we'll be getting more of that now that he's doing it on his own and doesn't have anyone to satisfy but himself and his readers. So yeah, I encourage everyone to become one of them.
Yep. Doyle's the best. Like he's the best at this of any of us, I think. And you should support his stuff. Like I already have, and I hope people do the same.
Yep. Some of the easiest, I'm like, oh, you're charging money for a subscription now? Cool. Here's my credit card. And then Doyle said that I wasn't supposed to actually mail my credit card to him, and so I'm still waiting for that back. But once we,
I sent him a $12 check. He hasn't responded. No, look, one thing I think I've repeated a lot since moving to this show more full time has been like the only way you grow a community, the only way you grow the sport at large is to do it together, right? And I think the unforeseen positive side effect of a lot of shrinking of the major publications covering MLS is you've given birth to this incredible wave of independent reporters and coverage. And frankly, it's more affordable and better in some ways, right? So just another opportunity to contribute to the culture, as it were. I'm a white guy saying culture unironically, but that's okay.
On a podcast.
Yeah, on a podcast, yeah.
My God, that's somebody's bingo right there.
Yeah, I'm wearing Uniqlo too, so I'm hitting all the check marks.
Wow.
No.
We have to end this. We have to end this show now.
Yeah, go subscribe to Matt Doyle at tacticsfreezone.com. Subscribe to Backheeled. That's where you'll find writing from Joe Lowery and another pod, Ben Wright as well. Am I making that up? Ben Wright's for
No, yeah, absolutely.
Backheeled
Ben's the best.
Perfect. I was 90% sure. No, but I say all that to say thank you all so much for being here again. As always, if you wherever you are listening to this can like, subscribe, comment, rate, whatever it is, those things go, I think, a much longer way than people realize in terms of spreading us out to the algorithm. It does mean a lot. You can follow on social media, Men in Red 97, anywhere and everywhere that you would like soccer coverage. And of course, meninred97.com. That's where we'll keep you the most up to date on all breaking news, coverage stories. Tim and Alex doing the down dirty of the reporting, or me talking about things that I like sometimes. it's the best place to find Chicago soccer information. Yeah, but thank you so much again to Joe for joining us, Joe Lowery from Backheeled.com, chipping in to do our little season preview here. And thank you so much to the listeners who have stuck with us through the offseason. We are now mere days away from the promised land. Thank you so much for joining us around the bonfire. Come on, you men in red. We'll see you soon.